I was 78 years old when I finally decided to put an end to it. The weight of the past had been crushing me for decades, but I always carried it with grace, like a woman who had learned to endure. But there are some wounds deep inside that don't just heal. They fester. And they wait for the right moment. Before I continue this heart-wrenching story, kindly subscribe to this Grandma Story channel. Hit that like button, and turn on notifications so you never miss another jaw-dropping revenge story. Let me take you back to that night. The night that changed everything. I had spent the evening before my wedding, just a mere 30 years old at the time, in the small house I shared with my then-fiancé William. It was meant to be a time for joy, excitement for the next chapter of my life, but what happened instead was a betrayal so deep, it twisted my heart forever. It was after midnight when I received that call from my father-in-law, Don. I remember the coldness of the air in the house, the quiet hum of the fridge in the kitchen. I had been brushing my hair when the phone rang. I could barely make out his voice on the other end, but he sounded different, strained, almost urgent. "Come over here, Vicky," he said, his voice low. "I want to bless you before you marry my son. It's important." I hesitated for a moment, but I didn't want to seem rude. It was tradition after all, right? To receive a blessing before stepping into the life of marriage. So I grabbed my sweater and drove to his house, which was just a few blocks away. The old wooden house had creaked with every step I took on its sagging porch. I knocked on the door, and when it opened, I was greeted by a smile that felt off. "Come in," Dawn said softly, stepping aside. The house was dark, with only the soft glow of a table lamp on in the living room. "Where's Ruth?" I asked, looking around. Ruth, my soon-to-be mother-in-law, was usually always there, but she was nowhere in sight. "She's asleep," Dawn replied with a casual shrug. "It's just you and me." I didn't question it. I should have, but I didn't. He led me to the sitting room and asked me to sit on the couch. That's when the unease hit me. The house felt colder, quieter somehow. I sat down waiting when he turned off the lamp, plunging the room into near darkness. I couldn't see his face clearly, but I could feel the shift in the air. He came closer, and before I could react, his hands were on me, his breath hot and heavy in the dark. "Don't scream," he whispered in a voice so commanding it stopped me from moving. "You want your blessing, don't you?" I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. All I could feel was terror, the cold air, the silence that swallowed my screams. He had made it clear. His betrayal was deliberate, and there was nothing I could do. But I was not the same girl who had been so vulnerable years before. I wasn't just going to accept this. I would get my revenge. I didn't know how, not yet. But I knew one thing. The quietest of us can be the fiercest when we finally decide to fight back. And fight back I did. But it took years. If you're with me so far, if this story has touched you, I need you to do something for me. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, like this video, and share it with someone who needs to hear this story. Let me know in the comments below where you're watching from. I'd love to know where my story is reaching. Now, stay tuned for the next chapter, where I'll tell you what happened after that night. How the years passed and how my life changed as I slowly and quietly began to plot my revenge. I'm not talking about just an ordinary revenge. No, this is something much more powerful. Something that would make him pay. But for now, I'll leave you hanging. 2 years had passed since that night. 2 long, torturous years, filled with pain, grief, and guilt. But through it all, I had learned something important. I had learned to control my emotions, to keep my thoughts hidden beneath the surface. And more importantly, I had learned that revenge isn't something you rush into. It's something you plan carefully, quietly, until the moment is right. I continued with my life, pretending like everything was normal. William and I got married, and life seemed to move on as it always does. We bought a house, started a family. But something inside me was broken, and every day I felt the weight of that brokenness, the heavy burden of a secret that no one could ever know. I couldn't tell William what had happened. He would never believe it. His father was a respected man in the community, a man who was always the picture of honor. But I knew the truth, and that truth was buried deep within me, growing into something dark. Don would come over occasionally, offering help with the house or the kids. He'd smile, that same smile, the one that made my stomach churn. But I was never fooled. I knew what he had done, and I also knew that his time would come. At first, I wasn't sure how I would make him pay. It wasn't like I could confront him directly. No, he was too powerful for that. But I also knew I had something he didn't. Patience. Time. So I bided my time. Started with small things. I'd see him at community events, his face full of pride and arrogance. I'd smile politely, act as though nothing had happened. But in my heart I was plotting. I knew he had a weakness, something that could destroy him if I played my cards right. It was just a matter of finding the right opportunity. The first breakthrough came when I discovered that Don's business, his pride and joy, was in trouble. He had invested heavily in a real estate project that was losing money fast. I overheard him talking to his lawyer one afternoon. His voice low and frantic, but I could hear the fear in it. The same fear I had once felt long ago, when I was trapped in his grip. I smiled to myself. This was it. This was my chance. I approached the situation carefully. I started getting involved in the same circles, asking questions, learning about the financial situation. I used my position as a mother and wife to get close to the people who could help me destroy him. And slowly, over the course of months, I began to gather the information I needed. But it wasn't just about the business. It was about his pride, his reputation. I needed him to understand the consequences of his actions, to feel the same fear and helplessness that I had felt that night. I needed him to know that his world would crumble from beneath him, just as he had tried to do to me all those years ago. And then, one day, the perfect moment arrived. Don had fallen into a trap of his own making. The real estate deal had completely collapsed, and he was on the verge of losing everything. I watched as he tried to salvage what little he had left. His desperation was palpable, and it made my heart swell with satisfaction. It wasn't over yet, but I could feel it. The tide was turning. But I didn't want to end it just like that. I wanted him to feel the slow, agonizing burn of his own downfall. I wanted him to know that no matter how hard he tried, he would never escape the consequences of his actions. That's when I made my move. I called in the final pieces, the people who could ensure his collapse. It wasn't anything dramatic, nothing that would attract attention. Just a few well-placed words, a little financial maneuvering, and a carefully timed bit of information sent to the right people. All I had to do was wait. The first signs were subtle. His colleagues started distancing themselves. His financial backers began pulling out. And before he knew it, Don was on the brink of losing it all. But he wasn't finished. Not yet. He tried to reach out to me again, just like he had years ago. He wanted to talk, to make amends, to beg for forgiveness. I could see the desperation in his eyes. But I wasn't the same person I had been before. I was stronger now, colder. I had been planning this for so long, and there was no turning back. He invited me over, asking to meet in the same dark, empty house where it all began. My heart raced as I thought of that night, the night that had set everything into motion. But this time things would be different. When I arrived at his door, he greeted me with that same false warmth, but there was something else in his eyes now. Fear. He knew what was coming. "I'm sorry, Vicky," he said, his voice shaky. "I was wrong. I should have never." But I cut him off. "It's too late for apologies, Don. It's over." And with that, the final pieces of his world crumbled. But I didn't feel the satisfaction I thought I would. Instead, I felt free. The weight had finally been lifted. The years of pain and silence had come to an end. But I never wanted to make this about bitterness. My revenge wasn't about petty satisfaction. It was about reclaiming my life, my power, and my dignity. And when I walked away from that moment, I did so with quiet strength. So, if you've been with me through this story, if you felt every bit of the anger and heartbreak, I want you to do something for me. Like this video. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to my channel for more powerful stories just like this one. And drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. I love hearing from you. It's been 2 years since Dawn's downfall. 2 years since that night. And yet the weight of what had transpired still clung to me. But now it was different. I was different. Took me a long time to realize the full extent of my own transformation. I had been so consumed with revenge for so long that I hadn't truly grasped how much it had changed me. I hadn't just destroyed Dawn. I had rebuilt myself. I was a woman reborn, and I wasn't going to let anything, steal that from me again. I thought I'd find peace once he had paid for what he'd done to me. But peace didn't come in the way I expected. It wasn't about seeing him suffer. It was about seeing myself whole again, reclaiming the life he had stolen from me, piece by piece. In the months after his fall from grace, I tried to move on. I thought I could bury the past, leave it all behind. But the memories, they kept coming back, haunting me in flashes. There were nights when I couldn't sleep, lying awake in the quiet of my room, thinking about how close I had come to losing everything. But even then, I had a strength I hadn't realized I possessed until that moment. I had survived. I had taken control. I didn't tell William everything. How could I? He loved his father, even after all the years of mistakes. Even after everything Dawn had done, William refused to believe the truth. I didn't want to destroy what little was left of his faith in his father, but I had my own truth to live with. The truth of what had happened that night. The night that changed the course of my life forever. And in a way, it had changed William's life too. One afternoon, nearly a year after Dawn's fall, William sat me down. There was a solemn look in his eyes, a weight in his voice that I hadn't heard before. He had a confession of his own. "I found out some things, Vicky," he began, his voice low and uncertain. "I've been digging around, asking questions. And I know you've been carrying something. I don't know what it is, but I can feel it. And I can't help but think that I'm not the only one who's been hurt." I didn't know how to respond. The walls I had built so carefully, the walls that kept my pain hidden from him, were starting to crack. But I couldn't let him in. Not completely. Not yet. "I'm not hiding anything from you, William," I said softly, my voice shaking slightly, betraying me. "What happened, it's in the past now." But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. It was never truly in the past. It had never left me. "Vicky, I know something happened to you. And I want to help you. I want to understand. You don't have to carry it alone." His words cut deep, deeper than I wanted them to. And for a moment I thought I might finally tell him everything. I thought I might let him in, let him know the pain that had shaped me into who I was today. But then I remembered Dawn's face. The face of the man who had destroyed me in ways no one else would ever understand. "William, some things are just too much," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Some things, they stay buried." I could see the hurt in his eyes, the disappointment, but he said nothing. He simply nodded, and for the first time in a long time I felt a distance between us. It wasn't just the distance of years or misunderstandings. It was the distance of secrets, of unspoken truths. But even with that distance, I knew I was still strong. I had rebuilt myself piece by piece from the ground up. I had survived Dawn's cruelty, and I had survived my own guilt. And now, I was a woman who could stand tall on her own. But that doesn't mean I stopped thinking about revenge. Not completely. There was a part of me that still craved justice. A part of me that still wanted to see Dawn's reputation burn to the ground, to see him pay for what he had done. But I had learned something over the years. Sometimes, justice doesn't come in the form of punishment. Sometimes the greatest revenge is simply living a life that thrives in spite of the hurt. In fact, that was the truest form of revenge, showing the world that you will not be broken. And so, I did just that. I continued my life. I continued to raise my children, to enjoy the little moments that made life worth living. I found peace in the quiet mornings, in the small victories, and in the knowledge that I was stronger than the man who had tried to destroy me. But there was one last thing I had to do. It wasn't for me, but for him. 2 years after everything had happened, Don died. It wasn't violent or dramatic. He simply passed away in his sleep, a man who had lived his life with so many wrongs yet never facing the full consequences of them. I couldn't help but feel a sense of closure, a strange sense of finality that was neither sweet nor bitter. And so I moved forward, not with a heart full of hatred or resentment, but with a quiet strength that had come from surviving the unimaginable. If you've been following my story this far, and if it has moved you in any way, please hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories just like this. And I want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. The truth is, sometimes the hardest battles aren't fought on the outside. They're fought within. And the ones who survive are the ones who learn to let go and rebuild from the ashes. As the years passed, the grief and anger from Don's betrayal faded into something quieter, something I could carry with me without it weighing me down every day. But the story didn't end there. Life, as it always does, had a way of coming full circle, testing you when you least expected it. I had learned to love again in my own way. I found peace in the small things, gardening in the mornings, spending time with my children, and even starting to volunteer at a local nursing home. Gave me purpose. It allowed me to put my energy into something that felt right. For the first time, I was building relationships without fear, without the constant dread of betrayal hanging over me. But fate wasn't quite finished with me yet. I had been working at the nursing home for a little over 6 months when I met her. Her name was Claire, and she was 85, full of life despite the frailty that age had imposed upon her. She was sharp-witted, had a mischievous smile, and could make everyone laugh, even on the darkest days. But there was something in her eyes, a depth of sadness, a loss that she didn't speak about. One day, she sat next to me on the porch outside the nursing home, as the sun was setting. It was a peaceful evening, the sky painted in shades of orange and purple. Claire turned to me, her hands resting on her lap. "Vicky, you remind me of myself," she said softly, her voice filled with an unspoken understanding. "A long time ago, I was in a similar place." I raised an eyebrow, not sure where she was going with this. "What do you mean?" I asked. She smiled, though it was tinged with sadness. "I've had my share of betrayals too. Some from the ones I loved most. My own children. They left me here alone to die." Her words hit me like a jolt of electricity, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a connection to someone who truly understood. Someone who had lived through the same kind of pain I had, though in a different form. "What happened?" I asked quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. Claire's eyes glazed over for a moment, as though she was seeing something from the past. "I had a husband once, a good man, until he wasn't. And my children, well, they were never as close as they seemed. In the end, it was just me. Alone." I felt the weight of her words. It wasn't just her husband who had betrayed her, but her children. Her own flesh and blood had left her in a place where she was forgotten, abandoned. "I know how it feels," I said, my voice trembling with the emotion I had kept hidden for so long. "I know what it's like to be left behind by the ones you thought would never hurt you. But sometimes we're forced to rebuild on our own. And that's when we find our true strength." She nodded, a silent acknowledgement that we both understood the struggle. "You've rebuilt yourself, haven't you?" she said, her voice soft but knowing. You're stronger than you think. And just like that, everything came full circle. I had been holding on to my own pain, believing that it was mine alone to carry. But Claire's words, her story, showed me that there was more to it. I wasn't alone. I wasn't the only one who had suffered. And in a way, this nursing home, with its quiet wisdom and the people inside it, had become a sanctuary for me, just as much as I had become a sanctuary for others. A few days after that conversation, Claire passed away. It wasn't sudden. She had been in and out of the hospital for a while, but when she went, it felt like a piece of my heart went with her. Not because of the sadness, but because of the strength she had passed on to me. I went to her funeral, along with several others from the nursing home. I stood there in the back of the room, feeling the tears well up in my eyes. And as I looked around, I realized something. Life was fragile. Relationships were fragile. But the one thing that wasn't fragile, the one thing that couldn't be taken from us, was the strength to move forward. I didn't need revenge anymore. What I needed was closure. And Claire, in her own way, had given that to me. I had come to understand that forgiveness wasn't about the other person. It wasn't about letting them off the hook. It was about freeing yourself, moving forward, and giving yourself the peace that you deserve. And so I did. I moved forward. Slowly but surely. I let go of the bitterness, the anger, and even the memories of Dawn. I focused on what really mattered. My family, the people who loved me, and the life I had built from the ashes of what had once been my greatest pain. If you've been with me this far, through all the pain and the heartache, I want to say thank you. If this story has touched you, if it's made you feel something deep inside, then please take a moment to like this video. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, and leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. I love hearing from all of you. Make sure you subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories just like this. Because the truth is, sometimes the strongest people are the ones who've had to rebuild the most. And I'm living proof of that. The years had passed, but the memories never really left. They lingered in the corners of my mind, as they do for us all. But somehow with time I had learned to keep them in their place. I'd built a life, a peaceful one, filled with love, family, and acceptance. I worked at the nursing home, helping people like Claire navigate their own painful pasts, and I spent my days in the quiet solace of my garden, tending to the flowers that grew brighter every season. But life, in its infinite way, had a final chapter for me, one I never expected. It was the fall of that year, a crisp October evening, when I got a letter in the mail. At first, I thought it was just another bill, another reminder of the world moving on while I stayed firmly planted in the present. But as I opened it, I saw a name that made my heart race. William. My son, my child. I hadn't heard from him in months. Our relationship had been strained for years, ever since the truth about his father had come out. He was angry, confused, and above all, disappointed in me for keeping so many secrets, for holding the truth about Dawn's betrayal inside, for all those years. I didn't blame him. I had made the choice to protect him from it, to keep him in the dark, and now that darkness had grown between us. The letter read simply, "Mom, I need to talk. Can you meet me at the old house?" I stood there, staring at the paper in my hands. The old house. The place where it had all begun. The place where Dawn had betrayed me, where my life had fractured into pieces. The house I had never returned to since that night. But now, here I was, decades later, staring at the invitation to face it once again. I wasn't sure what had brought William to ask me to meet him there. Was it guilt? Was it finally understanding the things I'd kept from him all these years? Was it his own need for closure? I didn't know. All I knew was that I couldn't keep avoiding the past forever. Not now. Not when he was asking for it. That night, I drove to the old house. The night air was cool, a chill that seemed to bring back the ghosts of the past. The house loomed in front of me, its once proud walls now faded, its windows dark and hollow. It seemed like a distant memory, Yet somehow it felt like I had never left. I knocked on the door, and within moments, William opened it. His face was older now, the lines of age and experience marking his once youthful features. But there was something else in his eyes, something softer, something that made my heart swell with a mixture of hope and fear. "Mom," he said quietly, stepping aside to let me in. I stepped through the threshold, my heart pounding in my chest. It was as if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for the words that would come. We sat in the living room, the same couch where Dawn had once sat, and for a moment I couldn't speak. My throat was tight and my mind was racing. But I knew that I couldn't keep running away from this moment. "I know you've been angry with me," I started, my voice trembling. "I know I've kept things from you. But William, I didn't want you to carry that burden. I didn't want you to know the truth about your father." He nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on the floor. "I understand now," he said. "I do. But it's taken me years, Mom. Years to realize that I wasn't angry just because of what you kept from me. I was angry because I never understood why you stayed. Why you put up with it." I swallowed hard, the weight of his words settling deep inside me. I didn't know how to explain it. How to explain why I stayed with Dawn, why I kept pretending everything was fine. Why I had let that man control me for so long. "I stayed because I didn't know any other way," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "I didn't know how to leave. I didn't know how to fight. And when I finally did, it was too late." We sat in silence for a while, the weight of the years between us heavy in the room. But then slowly William reached out and took my hand. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: hope. Maybe not for what had happened, but for what could still be. "I think I finally understand, Mom," he said softly. "I think I get why you did what you did. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the things I said, for the things I didn't understand." And just like that, the years of pain seemed to fall away. Not completely, but enough. Enough for me to believe that maybe, just maybe, I could heal. Maybe, just maybe, there was still time to make things right. I looked at him, the boy I had raised, the man he had become, and I realized something. It wasn't about the past anymore. It was about what we could build together now. The past had shaped us both, but it didn't have to define us. "I've forgiven you, William," I said, my voice steady now. "I just want us to move forward. To find peace." And in that moment, for the first time in years, I felt like I was truly free. Free from the chains of my past. Free from the burden of my secrets. I had finally forgiven myself, and I had forgiven him. It was time to start anew. As I left the old house that night, I didn't feel the weight of regret anymore. Instead, I felt a quiet joy, the kind that comes from knowing you've made peace with your past, and with your heart. If you've made it this far in the story, and if it has touched you, I want you to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. I want to hear your stories too. The road to healing wasn't a smooth one, but in some ways it had become easier now. The weight of the past still lingered, but I had learned how to carry it. Some days I felt as though I was walking lighter than before, but on others the memories came rushing back, uninvited and heavy. It was a Saturday afternoon when I received another call. This time it was from the nursing home. The voice on the other end was calm, almost too calm, but there was a sharp edge to it that made my stomach drop. "Vicky, we need you to come in. It's Claire. She's not doing well." I didn't need to ask for more details. I knew. I had known something was coming. I rushed over, my heart beating a little faster than usual, my thoughts racing. Claire had been a constant in my life for the last few years, a woman who had shared her wisdom, her strength, and her vulnerability. She was like a second mother to me, someone who had taught me that there was beauty even in the midst of pain. When I arrived, I was led to her room. The nurses were gathered around her bed, but they stepped aside as I entered, giving me space. Claire's frail body lay beneath the white sheets, her breathing shallow, her eyes closed, but there was a peacefulness to her now that I had never seen before. I sat beside her, taking her cold hand in mine. It was strange, how it felt like everything was finally slowing down, like the world around me was falling into a kind of stillness I hadn't expected. I leaned over, pressing a kiss to her forehead, and whispered softly, "Thank you, Claire. Thank you for everything." The silence in the room was deafening, but somehow it was comforting. I had made my peace with the past, and now, as Claire's time seemed to be coming to an end, I realized that the journey I had been on wasn't just about revenge or redemption. It was about letting go. Letting go of the past, of the hurt, of the anger that had held me captive for so long. And now it was time to let go of her too. Claire passed away that night. It wasn't sudden, but it was quiet. It was as if she had just slipped away, like a leaf drifting down from a tree. There was no dramatic final breath, no last gasp. Just a peaceful exit, one that made me think that maybe, just maybe, she had already found her peace long before the end came. Her funeral was a small affair, just the people who truly loved her. I stood by the grave, a quiet presence among the mourners. I didn't cry, not because I didn't feel the loss, but because I knew that Claire was exactly where she needed to be. Her life had been full of struggles, but she had never let those struggles break her spirit. In some ways, I felt she had passed that strength on to me. I went back to my life, but it was different now. I didn't seek revenge anymore. I didn't even need validation. I had learned that life was not about waiting for someone to make it right for you. It was about making it right for yourself. And so, I spent my days in quiet reflection, working with the elderly at the nursing home, helping others find peace in their final years, just as Claire had helped me find mine. It wasn't a glamorous life, but it was mine. And for the first time in so many years I felt content. Months passed, and then one day, while I was out shopping for some flowers for my garden, I bumped into an old friend. Grace, a woman who had once been my closest confidant. We had drifted apart after William and I had fallen out, but seeing her now, it felt like no time had passed at all. We sat together in a cafe, sipping coffee as we caught up. It wasn't awkward or forced, just two old friends talking about life. "I've heard about the changes in your life, Vicky," Grace said, her voice gentle. "You've really come a long way." I nodded, but there was a heaviness in her words. "I've learned that some things aren't worth holding on to," I said quietly. "Especially pain. You can't let it control you forever." Grace smiled, a knowing smile that told me she understood. "You're right. You've been through a lot. But look at you now." And that was when it hit me. Sometimes the true measure of our strength is not how we hold on to the past, but how we let go of it. The process of letting go, of moving forward, of living with purpose. It takes more strength than any act of revenge could ever give. That night I returned home, the house filled with the warmth of memories. My children had grown into strong, capable individuals, and I had finally found a sense of peace that I never thought possible. But as I sat down at my kitchen table, I realized that life doesn't always give us the answers we want. Sometimes it gives us the answers we need. And I had found mine. I had found the courage to move forward, to rebuild, to live again. And for the first time in so many years, I could honestly say that I was happy. Truly happy. If this story has touched you in any way, if it's made you reflect on your own life and the things you've carried, I want you to take a moment to like this video. Share it with someone who might need to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories like this one. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Remember, the hardest battles aren't always fought on the outside. They're the ones we fight within. And the greatest victories come from learning to forgive ourselves. As the months went on, my life seemed to settle into a new rhythm. I found myself waking up every morning with a sense of purpose that I hadn't felt in years. I had let go of the anger that had consumed me for so long, and now I was able to focus on what truly mattered: my family, my work, and the small joys that filled my days. The past, with all its pain and betrayal, was now just a distant memory that no longer controlled me. But fate has a way of reminding you that healing is never truly complete. One crisp fall evening, as I sat on my porch watching the sunset, I received a call that changed everything. It was from an old acquaintance, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. "Vicky, it's Ruth. Don's sister," the voice on the other end said, her tone hesitant, almost apologetic. "I need you to listen to me, just for a moment." My heart skipped a beat. Ruth. After all these years. I had tried to bury every memory of Don's family, but I couldn't help the curiosity that flared inside me. I had already closed that chapter of my life, but now it seemed it wasn't quite done with me. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice calm but with a hint of suspicion. She took a deep breath before speaking, her words carefully chosen. "I know you've probably moved on, and I don't blame you for keeping your distance, but there's something I need to tell you about Don. Something you didn't know." The weight of her words hit me immediately. I hadn't wanted to hear anything about Don, let alone anything new. But Ruth's voice carried an urgency I couldn't ignore. There was something there, something that demanded my attention. "Go on," I said, bracing myself for whatever was coming. "He wasn't the man you thought he was. I know that sounds ridiculous given everything that happened, but there's something you need to hear. I can't go into details over the phone, but I need you to meet me. Please. It's important." I sat there for a moment weighing my options. The woman who had been married to Don's brother, who had been as much a part of my life as I had been a part of hers, was asking me to meet her, to hear something that might change everything. I had moved on, I thought. But the curiosity was undeniable. I agreed to meet her the next morning. When I walked into the small cafe where Ruth had asked to meet me, I saw her sitting at the back, her face as tired and worn as I remembered. She had never been the strongest, but there was something about her now, something different. She looked as if the weight of the world had been placed on her shoulders, and she was carrying it alone. She waved me over, and I sat down across from her, the silence between us thick with unspoken history. "I'm sorry, Vicky," she said, her voice shaky. "I've carried this burden for too long. I've tried to protect my family, but the truth is, Don's death wasn't just the result of old age. There's more to it than that." My pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" Ruth hesitated, taking a sip of her coffee before speaking again. "I've been going through his old things, trying to make sense of everything. And I found something that I wish I'd never seen. But now I need you to know." She pulled a small envelope from her bag, her hands trembling slightly as she handed it to me. It was sealed, the edges yellowed with time. Without thinking, I opened it. Inside there were photographs. Photos of Don. Pictures I had never seen before. Pictures that made my heart freeze. There, in black and white, was Don standing next to a woman I didn't recognize. Her face was partially obscured, but the familiar lines of his face were unmistakable. But that wasn't the shocking part. It was the child in her arms. A child that, to my horror, looked strikingly like William. Ruth saw the shock on my face and quickly added, "I never knew. Had no idea. I think he kept it hidden, even from me. But that child was his." The world seemed to tilt beneath me. I felt dizzy, my breath coming in short bursts as I looked at the photographs. What was Ruth telling me? What did this mean? Was William truly Don's son? Had I been living a lie for all these years? "Why didn't you tell me this sooner?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. I didn't know how. I didn't know what to do with this information. But now, with everything that's happened, I felt like you needed to know. I sat back in my chair, the weight of her words sinking in. This was not the closure I had imagined. This was a bombshell, one that threatened to undo everything I had worked so hard to rebuild. But as I looked at the pictures, I realized that this was yet another piece of the puzzle. It was as if the past, with all its secrets and betrayals, had finally caught up with me, demanding to be acknowledged. I didn't know what I was going to do with this information, or how it would affect my relationship with William. But one thing was clear: nothing, absolutely nothing, was as it seemed. I stood up slowly, my legs shaky, and gave Ruth a tight nod. "Thank you for telling me. I don't know what this means yet, but I'll figure it out." She nodded, her eyes filled with a mix of guilt and relief. "I know. I just hope you find the peace you deserve, Vicky." As I left the cafe, my mind was spinning. The path forward, which had once seemed so clear, was now clouded with uncertainty. But as I stood outside, the cool autumn air biting at my skin, I made a silent promise to myself. I would find the truth. I would uncover the past, no matter how painful it was, and I would deal with it on my own terms. Because the truth, no matter how hard it was to face, was the only thing that could set me free. And now I had to decide. Would I confront William with this shocking revelation? Would I tell him the truth about his father's betrayal, the secret child, the legacy of lies? Or would I let it all go, accepting that some things are better left buried? If you've made it this far, I hope this story has touched you, made you think about your own life and relationships. Please like this video, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and subscribe to my channel for more emotional and powerful stories like this one. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I love hearing from all of you. The days after that conversation with Ruth passed in a blur. I couldn't stop thinking about what she had told me. The photos, the truth about Dawn's secret child. The weight of it all felt like a suffocating fog. But it wasn't just the shock of the revelation that had me spiraling. It was the question that kept gnawing at me. What did this mean for William? I spent the following weeks avoiding him, unable to face him with this new knowledge. He had always been the light of my life, my pride and joy. The thought that his whole existence could be a lie was too much to bear. How would I even begin to tell him? How would I navigate the delicate threads of our relationship if I revealed this truth? But the more I avoided him, the more it felt like a betrayal. William deserved to know, even if it tore him apart. He deserved to understand the truth about his father, no matter how painful it might be. And so, on a chilly evening in early November, I decided I couldn't wait any longer. I called him and asked him to come over. He agreed without hesitation, and when he arrived, I led him to the living room, my heart pounding in my chest. "Mom, what's going on?" he asked, his brow furrowed in concern. I could see the tension in his face, the unspoken question in his eyes. He knew something was off, but he didn't know what. "Sit down, William," I said softly, gesturing to the couch. "There's something I need to tell you." He sat down, his eyes never leaving me. I took a deep breath, steadying myself before I spoke. "Do you remember the night before my wedding?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. He nodded, but there was confusion in his eyes. "Yeah, remember. It's a long time ago, Mom. What does this have to do with now?" I took another breath, trying to keep my composure. "It has everything to do with now. William, I've kept something from you for a long time. And it's time you knew the truth. About your father. About Dawn." His eyes darkened, and I could see the old wounds flare up in his gaze. I knew he still had unresolved anger about his father's past, about the things Dawn had done. But what I was about to tell him would change everything. And I wasn't sure if we'd ever be able to go back to the way things were. "Mom, I've already heard a lot about Dawn. I don't know what else you can say that'll change my view of him." I shook my head slowly, my hands trembling as I picked up the envelope Ruth had given me weeks ago. "It's not about what you think you know. It's about what you don't know. And I'm sorry I never told you before, but there's something you need to understand." I handed him the envelope, the photos inside now seeming heavier than ever. He took them cautiously, his eyes scanning each picture as his face slowly drained of color. I could see the confusion, then the realization, creeping into his expression. Is this a joke?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. That's me, isn't it?" I nodded, the words stuck in my throat. "Yes, William. That child in those photos. That's you." Don had a secret. He had a child with another woman, a woman who lived in the same town, a woman you never knew about. He stood up abruptly, the photos slipping from his hand and fluttering to the floor. I could see his hands shaking as he ran them through his hair, the weight of the revelation crashing down on him. This isn't possible, Mom. He would have told me. He would have said something." I stood, walking over to him, reaching out to him, but he stepped back, his eyes full of disbelief. "William, I didn't know. I didn't know any of this either. But Ruth found these photos after Don's death. She didn't know either, but she thought you needed to know the truth." He turned away from me, walking to the window and staring out into the night. His voice was hoarse when he spoke again. How could he do this? How could he hide something like this from me, from us? I didn't have the answer. I couldn't explain Don's actions, his secrets, his betrayal. There was no making sense of it. Not then and not now. But what I did know was that it wasn't just his mistake. It was ours too. It was the mistake of letting the past dictate our present. And now we were both caught in the web of that past. "I'm so sorry, William," I said, my voice breaking. "I never meant for you to find out like this. But you deserve the truth. You deserve to know who your father really was. Even if it's painful. Even if it changes everything." He turned to me, his face a mixture of anger and pain. "What do I do with this, Mom? How do I live with this? How do I look at my life, my family, and not wonder what else is a lie?" I didn't have an answer. I couldn't give him one. All I could do was stand there, my heart aching for him. And for myself. But there was one thing I knew for sure. This truth, as hard as it was to face, would eventually lead to healing. Not right away, not in the way we wanted, but in a way that would allow us both to move forward. One day, we'd be able to look back on this moment and see it for what it was. A painful chapter that had to be written, but one that would eventually lead us to a place of understanding and peace. William sat back down, his head in his hands, as the weight of everything settled around him. "I don't know if I can forgive him for this." I sat beside him, my hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to forgive him, William. Not now. But you do need to forgive yourself. You need to let go of the anger that's been holding you back. And you need to take this truth and use it to make peace with your past, no matter how hard it is." For the first time in a long time, I saw a flicker of hope in his eyes. He wasn't angry anymore. He wasn't broken. He was just hurt. But hurt could heal. And I hoped that, in time, we would both find the strength to heal together. If you followed this story, if you felt the pain and confusion of a family torn apart by secrets, I want you to take a moment to like this video. Share it with someone who might need to hear this message. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more powerful, emotional stories. I want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below and share your thoughts. Let's keep this conversation going. The weeks that followed that night were difficult. William and I barely spoke, and when we did, it was strained, full of questions neither of us could answer. The truth about Don, the revelations that had shaken everything we thought we knew, still loomed large between us. And yet, in some quiet corner of my mind, I knew we had to face it. We had to deal with the pain, the confusion, the lies, no matter how much it hurt. But there was something else I wasn't prepared for. One evening, a month after the revelation, as I was cleaning up after dinner, the phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. I hesitated, but curiosity got the best of me. "Hello, Vicky. It's Ruth." Her voice was urgent, laced with a tone I hadn't heard before. "Ruth, what's going on?" I asked, my pulse quickening. I hadn't heard from her since the day she'd told me about Don's secrets. "I'm sorry to call you out of the blue," Ruth said, her voice shaky. "But there's something you need to know. Something I should have told you sooner." My stomach dropped. "What is it? What's happened?" "I didn't want to cause any more pain, but I've been thinking about what you said, about needing the truth. And there's something I found after Don passed. It's not just about the photos. There's more." I felt my heart skip a beat. "What do you mean? What more could there be?" "I found his journal," she said, her voice lower now, almost a whisper. "It's in his handwriting and it explains everything. The things he did. The choices he made. And it has something to do with William. Something important." I was silent for a moment, the gravity of her words sinking in. The idea that Don had kept even more hidden from us, things we didn't know about our own family, was too much to bear. But Ruth's voice held a sense of finality to it. I knew this wasn't something I could ignore. "I'm coming over," I said, my voice firm. "Where are you?" Ruth gave me the address, and I wasted no time. I got in my car and drove over to her house. My mind was racing, 1,000 questions swirling around. What could be in that journal? What else had Don hidden? And why hadn't Ruth told me about it sooner? When I arrived at her home, she was waiting for me by the door, her face pale and drawn. She looked older than I remembered, the stress of the last few months taking its toll. She led me inside, and we sat down at her kitchen table. She handed me a small, worn journal, the leather binding cracked and faded. "I've read through it," she said quietly. "But I didn't understand everything. Some parts are hard to make sense of." I took the journal from her, my hands trembling. The weight of it felt significant, like holding the key to a mystery that had haunted us for decades. I opened it slowly, the pages yellowed with age, the ink fading in some places but still legible. I flipped through the first few pages, the writing shaky but clear. It was Don's handwriting, and it was filled with details I hadn't expected. Thoughts on family, regrets, moments of clarity that had eluded him during his life. But as I turned to the last few pages, my breath caught in my throat. There, scrawled in large letters, were words I hadn't anticipated. "I've made a mistake," Don had written. "And I've made it so many times, I don't know if I can fix it. But the truth about William, he isn't mine. He never was. He's the son of someone else. A man I wronged, a man whose life I ruined. I kept the secret for too long, and I've lived with it, but I can't anymore. The guilt is eating me alive." I stopped reading for a moment, trying to process what I had just read. What was this? Was it some kind of confession? A final attempt at redemption? My mind spun in confusion as I read the rest. "I've been trying to protect him," Don continued in his final lines. "But maybe it's time for him to know the truth. If you're reading this, Ruth, then maybe it's time for you to make it right too. Tell Vicky. Tell William. Tell them the truth. I wasn't a good man, but I wanted to be. I just didn't know how." I let the journal fall from my hands, my mind reeling. Don had kept this secret for all these years, and now it seemed as though the final piece of the puzzle had been revealed. But the truth was more complicated than I could have imagined. William, my son, wasn't Don's biological child. And that, in itself, changed everything. I didn't know how to feel. I didn't know what to do with this information. My world once again was shifting beneath me. Ruth sat beside me, her eyes filled with guilt. "I don't know what this means for you, Vicky. But I think you and William need to know. You deserve the truth." I nodded, though I felt a lump form in my throat. I have to tell him. I can't keep this from him. But even as I said it, a part of me felt the weight of what this would mean. Would William feel betrayed by me too? Would he want to know the truth? And how could I possibly explain it all to him without destroying the fragile bond we had just started to rebuild? The truth, no matter how painful, had to come out. And it was up to me to decide when and how. As I left Ruth's house that night, I was lost in thought, my mind filled with questions and uncertainty. But one thing was clear. This was the final chapter of Dawn's story, and the beginning of a new one. One that would require strength, courage, and the kind of truth that could either heal or tear us apart. The days that followed Ruth's revelation felt like they lasted forever. The weight of the truth hung over me like a storm cloud, and no matter how hard I tried to shake it off, it wouldn't let me go. I couldn't stop thinking about that journal entry. Dawn had confessed it all, in his own broken way. William wasn't his son. The man who had been my husband for so many years, the man who had torn my life apart, wasn't even the father of my child. I had to tell William. I had to face him, no matter how much I dreaded it. He needed to know the truth. We both did. But there was no easy way to say it. There was no simple way to drop a bombshell like this and hope everything would be fine. I had already betrayed him by keeping the secret for so long, and now I had to undo it. Felt like the hardest thing I had ever done. That evening, I waited for William in the living room, pacing back and forth. My hands were clammy, my heart racing in my chest. I had no idea how he would react. Would he be angry? Would he blame me? Or would he see it for what it was? A painful truth that no one could have prepared for. When the door finally opened, William walked in. His face a mixture of exhaustion and worry. He had been working long hours lately, and I could see the stress etched on his face. But when he saw me standing there waiting for him, he knew something was wrong. "Mom!" His voice was tentative, unsure. "What's going on? What's this about?" I didn't know where to start. How could I explain something so complex, something that had haunted me for years, without completely shattering everything? "William, My voice faltered as I tried to find the right words. "I found something. Something you need to know. About your father. And about the truth." He looked at me, confusion crossing his face. "The truth? What are you talking about?" I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "I know it's hard to hear, but your father, Dawn, he wasn't your biological father." I saw the shock in his eyes, the disbelief. "What? What do you mean? You've got to be kidding me." I handed him the journal Ruth had given me, and he took it with shaking hands. He flipped through the pages, his face slowly going pale as he read Dawn's confession. The air between us seemed to grow heavier with each passing second. The silence was deafening. "I didn't want to believe it either," I said, my voice breaking. "But the truth is, Dawn wasn't your father. You're the son of another man, someone Dawn wronged. Someone whose life he ruined. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I didn't want to hurt you." William looked up from the journal, his eyes wide, his expression unreadable. The pain in his eyes was unbearable, and I could see that he was struggling to process it. The anger that had once been there, the resentment he had carried for years, seemed to melt away, replaced by a deep sadness. "So, all this time," his voice trembled, "I wasn't even his son. I don't know who I am anymore." I reached out to him, my heart aching for him. "William, you are still my son. You're still the man you've always been. This doesn't change that. It doesn't change who you are or what you mean to me." He shook his head, his eyes distant. "How do I even process this, Mom? How do I look back at everything and not feel like it's all been a lie?" I didn't have the answers. I didn't know how to make it better. But I knew that he needed time. Time to understand, time to heal, time to figure out what this meant for him. But more than anything, he needed to know that he wasn't alone. That I was here and I always would be. "I don't have all the answers, William," I said softly, my voice full of regret. "But I'm here for you. I always will be." He didn't speak for a long while. Instead, he sat down on the couch, his head in his hands. I didn't know what to say, so I just sat there with him, letting the silence stretch out between us. The air was thick with the weight of everything we had just uncovered. But in that moment I realized something. I couldn't fix everything, but I could be there for him. That's what mattered. "I don't know what to do with all this, Mom," he said after a while, his voice quiet. "I don't know how to feel. It's like everything I knew has been turned upside down." "I know," I said gently. "But you will figure it out. We'll figure it out together. One step at a time." William nodded, but his face was still full of confusion and pain. I knew this wasn't going to be easy for him. It was going to take time for him to come to terms with everything. But I also knew that this truth, as painful as it was, would eventually set him free. It had to. For the next few days, things were quiet. William withdrew into himself, processing everything at his own pace. But as time passed, we slowly began to rebuild. We started talking again, sharing moments that weren't tainted by the past. I could see the walls he had built around himself starting to come down, bit by bit. It wasn't easy, but we were moving forward. Together. I still wasn't sure how to navigate the aftermath of all that had happened, but one thing was clear. I couldn't let the past define me anymore. I couldn't let it control me or my relationship with my son. The truth had come to light, and with it came the possibility of healing. And while I didn't know what the future would hold, I knew one thing for sure. No matter what, I was going to stand by William. I was going to help him through this, just as I had always been there for him. Because family, no matter what, is what you make of it. If you've made it this far, if this story has touched you, I want to ask you to like this video, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and subscribe for more powerful, emotional stories like this one. Drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from. Your stories matter to me too. Stay tuned because the journey is never really over. The past can't be undone, but it can be understood and it can be healed.